Hi, everyone. I'm Sapphire, and today I'm going to be talking about collaboration across mediums for social change. I know the screen is pretty small, so I threw up a QR code on the TV that I saw some of you scanned already. There's also a URL at the bottom if you prefer to have this presentation on a screen that's a little closer to your face, or if you just want to be able to click on the links at a different time. So today we're going to talk about how interdisciplinary collaborations for social change can be a part of a composer's career. I'll talk a little bit about my successes and failures in this area as a composer and arts administrator, as well as the place of women composers in history when it comes to driving social change. So social change, if you're not familiar with the term, is kind of exactly what it sounds like from the two root words. It's how people's opinions, actions, traditions, and expectations are transformed every day and throughout time. Think of it a lot like breathing. It's something that is going to happen passively, but it can also be directed and trained. The thing about not being a man is that our music, by its sheer existence and performance, is a part of social change. Today, women and gender minorities still make up less than 15% of programming in the USA. It's increasing, slowly, but it's still far from equitable. Our participation often requires an unfair amount of effort. Through our participation, though, our stories from our lens, sharing our experiences and what we care about sparks awareness, thought, and change. Your presence doesn't need to be an additional message to be important, and any message that you do want to share has power. On this screen, I've included just a few women composers that are some of my favorites from throughout history, whose presence in music has invoked social change, either by defying what was the norm at the time or by writing music that is uplifting things such as the labor movement of coal miners, raising money for endangered species, or, like we talked about earlier, the music for climate change movement. The other thing, though, about being a composer in this business is that when I'm away from spaces like today, it can feel really lonely. But community is why I got into this business. Let's go back in time to 2017. Young Sapphire had just finished top of her class at the National Aerospace Scholars Academy and decided that she hated engineering with a burning passion, and she wasn't going to do that. So if my senior photos are any indication, music became my entire personality. And so I wrote, in response to this essay prompt, about an awesome moment from my junior year of high school when, like many kids, I was just in the band room soliciting after class so that my band director couldn't go home. And we had gotten out our instruments, and a bunch of us from my class started playing a marching band show from 3 years ago. We all still had it memorized, we still marked time, and that connection was everything that I wanted in my life. And so I dove into it, and I promise that this is relevant, we're getting to it. So to give you that timeline, I took that essay, I went and got a bachelor's degree in music composition, and if you're good at counting to 4, as everyone in this room is, you know that 75% of my undergrad was impacted by COVID. From there, I decided to get a master's degree in arts administration, as all of the shaken up systems showed me that, okay, this is something that I want to change, not just be a part of. And so I went into working full-time, working at Emmanuel Music in Boston, which is a Bach organization, while going into founding my own new music nonprofit and getting my graduate certificate in orchestra management. Now, during those years of undergrad, I was working at Costco, and working at Costco during 2020 was sure a time. I did end up in the ER with COVID, and while I was on a nebulizer, isolated from everyone, what actually connected me to the world was this awesome music being made by everyone, especially women. I was inspired by Project 19, Kolat Nashem, and all of these things among the shaken systems is what made me stop writing simply absolute music and start writing music that is directed towards society and what I was seeing in my life, just like all of the women that I was talking about earlier. At first, this was just doing the things I had been commissioned to do. With the Trials of Love, a brass quintet, I looked at superheroes, because who doesn't think superheroes when they hear brass, and I wrote about human responsibility towards one another. With Stars Beyond Turmoil, I leaned into a joke that we had created in the percussion section. My roommate Tamario had just bought in a hand pan, and the steel band had just bought in a bunch of bass pans. So logically, we started saying, these two things don't go together, even though it sounds like they would. And so I made them go together anyway, because I felt so lonely, but leaning into that joke made sense. So with that trajectory, for my senior recital, I wrote The City of Forget-Me-Nots. It includes a percussion quartet, and it features Jacob Raymond Johnson. He is a PhD candidate finishing his doctorate at UC Davis next month, who studies animal behavior, as well as Rhiannon Ling. She is a dramaturg, writer, and actress who works on Broadway, but because of COVID, was back home in Nebraska visiting her family. With them, I brought up my idea that had come to me through D&D campaigns of the City of Forget-Me-Nots, a magical ecosystem where magic is a natural resource, and then everyone, humans, come in and they industrialize and everyone dies. It's really unrealistic. And so I went and I composed this. I worked with the animal scientist, Jacob, in order to figure out how animal sounds are manipulated through industrialization. This was actually the focus of his PhD thesis. So we combined his research in my music. And then I worked with Rhiannon, a dramaturg, in order to see how human society had changed throughout the industrialization process throughout the USA. And I'm going to share with you guys just 2 minutes from that composition.
Magic crisis? Not a minute. If I hurricane sentient? Yeah, that's fine. No panicking in company time. They tell us to develop more land. Stream York and reserve and expand. We'll put a supply and demand that these guys understand. Market's got its own magic called invisible hand. And there it is, people. Your ears aren't lying. That's the cry of a primal fate dying, whose existence we rely on to make our own magic viable. They tried to hide it from you, but that sound is undeniable. And that smoke and soot is coming down. That storm breeze is real. Have a feeling that our leaders fell asleep at the wheel. Folks, you've been a lovely audience. Good night and good luck. I got this pressing premonition that we might all be
Numbness has overcome me and mine. My fingers have blackened, my tongue has slackened, my eyes are filled with pride. I could barely see at my family's deathbed. At least I could not feel the pain. I cannot feel anything now. Magic has left us, diving into the irrevocable earthen abyss of abysmal.
Cool, we're gonna move on. That was an excerpt of 2 different movements.
Is this not?
Now, you might have noticed that this was a little bit of a higher quality recording than you might get from a lot of senior recitals, especially at a Nebraska university. What was really interesting was when I was at the University of Nebraska and I was volunteering with our alumni association, specifically the women's section of our alumni association, and I was talking about this project, my mentor told me, and my mentor is a chemist, mind you, and she told me, you know that there's a grant specifically for bringing science communicators to the university, right? And I said, well, no, I didn't know that. That's not something they really tell the music students. And also, isn't that just for people in the College of Sciences? She said, no, it's actually not dedicated towards any school at all, because this is a grant done by the Alumni Association. Anyone can use it. I was like, oh, okay. So I applied for the grant thinking, oh, this is just gonna get ignored. And I got it. And so I was able to bring Jacob Johnson to Nebraska. The reason he wasn't on the stage is because my keyboardist had to go and get COVID the night of our dress rehearsal, so I barely graduated. But I also got a grant through the Emerging Media Arts program, which, again, not in the Glencorp School of Music, but the funds were actually not restricted to a specific student body. And I got that too. And I was able to bring on a cinematographer to make this film and also get 3 audio engineers who were able to record all of this live and make it a good enough quality that you heard what you heard today, and I was able to put it on streaming platforms. What I found was through these innovation labs, networking, and scholarships, these funds, even though they were not funds for music, were able to fund my music making. I also found that sense of camaraderie that I had been searching for since I wrote my college admissions essay. Getting to work with Rhiannon, with Jacob, with the 14 different musicians on that project on something that we all really cared about, honestly more than we cared about the stuff that we did in wind ensemble, was so gratifying. And that catharsis, being able to throw out all of the stuff that we had built up from just, being told about climate change our whole lives and not being able to actually really do much about it, was something that I really needed, and a lot of us needed. And I had a surprisingly large crowd at my senior recital, and people told me, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. And I was like, oh, this is actually enough to get people thinking. Now, did I start a new social movement? No. But I got people thinking, and that's really the goal of this. And so this single piece of music has led to an enhanced portfolio. I got a really good recording out of it, and this has allowed me to then further some of my best work. It allowed me to build relationships with Jacob Johnson. I have now worked with him on a book. I was one of the editors for his recently published book, Are You There, God? It's me, Darwin, as a creative collaborator. And I have also become the scoring composer on his podcast, Naturalist 20, which is a D&D podcast with a bunch of ecologists who explore all kinds of things about animal behavior through this fantasy lens. And then I've also consulted with Rhiannon Ling on a number of theater productions since then. And we have also been working on another audiobook. So not a podcast, audiobook. We're going to say those are 2 different things. And I have been consulting with her as she has started writing her own music as well. And that audience impact, like I said, people said, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way before. Those opportunities are the kinds of things that I, as a composer, live for. And so, logically, I went and got a master's degree in arts administration, diving into how can this be repeated? I don't want to just be a one-hit wonder, and I want this to be something that other composers can do. As many of you who have gone through the university system know, grants for music, if there are any, are often very restricted, and they're not a ton of money. Where music grants at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln often capped at $1,000, going into other schools allowed me to get over $10,000 funded for this project. I also wanted to know, how is this going to be something that is a part of my career, part of others' career, once I leave academia? And is this something that I can do outside of other structures? So, as you guys know, I got that master's degree, and what I discovered is that there is power in leveraging the use of sustainable development goals. These goals were agreed upon by the United Nations in 2015 and are dedicated to making the Earth and the human race happier and healthier through education, engagement, action, and resilience. It's everything from the climate to labor rights to gender equity. Many grants are tied directly to the SDGs, even if they don't say so explicitly. So, for example, at universities, such as I did with the City of Forget-Me-Nots and at Boston University to found my own new music nonprofit, Orchest. Many universities have funding available through their global affairs, innovation, and or entrepreneurship programs. I listed just a few examples of universities here. While these grants are most often marketed towards STEM and business majors, there are often not limits about which students and faculty can apply. Find that scientist who is working on the kind of project that you're interested in, team up, and get your application in, especially for those grants where people say, not that many people apply. Great, you're a shoo-in. These are some keywords that I have found through my research are very helpful to be looking for when you're looking through your various universities and colleges' grants databases to see what's available to you. Look for multidisciplinary. That's going to tell you that they're not just looking for one specific major or another. Look for sustainability. That means that it's going to likely be tied to one of these SDGs. Innovation. Guess what, guys? Music is innovative. We're about to go listen to some very innovative music theory. It counts. Innovation, STEAM. Guess what? Just because they're not marketing it towards the arts, the fact that they put STEAM in front of it means they have to include the arts. Awareness and networking. Like I said, that's how I was able to get somebody from UC Davis to come to Nebraska. Now, outside of academia, funds do tend to be more restricted. And there are various grants and opportunities for creatives focused around the Sustainable Development Goals, most often by name. These are just a few of those examples. To speak to the elephant in the room, in the past 2 months, many grants that get part of their funding from the National Endowment for the Arts or the Department of Education are operationally paused. The USA's own SDGs fund did get frozen last week, and I almost rewrote the whole presentation. But I didn't have enough time to do research on that. There is a state of uncertainty. And so that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for these grants still. It does mean that look at where the funding comes from and think about, if I only have a limited amount of time to put into grant applications, is this one that I feel like I can depend on? I highly recommend looking at the ones that are more privately held family trusts that are still focused on global affairs, such as the Ruby Artist Grant or the New England Federation for the Arts Association, which is actually not super tied to national funding. That means that you're able to rely on those funds a little better. Now, when it comes to the individuals, I have to recommend making sure that you are working with people who are just as passionate as you are. Rhiannon, the dramaturg that I talked about earlier, she convinced me that we should try and do a follow-up on the City of Forget-Me-Nots, instead focusing on what comes after a climate crisis. And so she was down for it, Jacob was down for it as creatives, and we had a whole pilot fully produced, fully scored, fully scripted, and had all of the fundraising structures lined up. And then we were one video away from qualifying for the crowdfunding method that we were going to use. This group did require us to make a video. And I was acting as executive producer. The 2 other producers who were supposed to be working with me on this and had been working with me for a year stopped replying to all of my text messages, all of my emails, and all of my phone calls, and nobody on the cast could reach them. They completely ghosted. And the legwork that had been done to get this funding had pretty much been done, aside from getting into the fundraising efforts, which is what we needed the other producers for. I wish that I had listened to my gut when the producers had been slower to answer text messages than I was. I thought, oh, they're just busy. No, they dropped out. They were no longer involved. I haven't heard from them since. But I do know that both of them are still producing. So crowdfunding, while it is still a very practical method that many people use, it has been especially successful for groups like Schwang Stage, Whitesnake Projects, as well as Front Porch Theater and Back Porch Arts. Yes, those are 2 different organizations. if the people who you are working on the crowdfunding with are not as dedicated to it as you are, it's a lot more volatile. The nice thing about getting grants and endowments is that those funds are already accumulated. So the challenges with this implementation, to sum it up, is resources have to be gathered. There's a limitation on formal curriculum. I didn't learn this stuff in music school. Most of us don't. There is an increasing amount of universities that are including grant writing and music business in the curriculum, but it often has to be sought out. And also lack of capacity. It's not like we're exactly swimming in free time. But if you do have the capacity to do this, and these are projects that you're passionate about, it is something that can be fulfilling. The way that this has shaped out for me, now that I'm out of academia, right now I am writing an aria for Sing Out Strong with Whitesnake's Projects. That is an opera company in Boston. And every year, since 2015, they have been focusing on one SDG goal. Sorry, the G stands for goal, one SDG, and then commissioning 6 different arias surrounded by that. And yes, I get paid for it. They hire 6 composers, 6 lyricists, and they get roughly 6 weeks to write the song. And then all of these get premieres, are sung multiple times throughout Boston. This year, the issue is climate resilience. And so, thanks to City of Forget-Me-Nots, which is now 3 years ago, I got commissioned for it. And for this, I really wanted to focus on how exhausting it is to be an advocate, to say the things that are in Christian Machado's poem and the things that can be really difficult about it. And so I lean into the echoing hammers in the piano. I push for the vocalist to use theatrical methods that come with feeling that hopeless advocacy. I reached out to local unions such as SEIU 509 and IATSE to speak with them about how their continuous labor efforts as well as their sustainability efforts have made them feel and implemented that into the composition. So all this to say, writing music about things that you care about, things that, for you might be about social justice and social change, are things that can be funded. And it's projects that you can, grow to meet your dreams. And it's something that where you get to work with scientists, like Loomis was talking about earlier, where you are working with dramaturgs. Even if you're not working in theater, working with people who do theater, it can be extremely fulfilling. It can open doors to getting paid, which I know we all like to be, and doing good work and making people go, I never thought about it that way. Building connections and building your career. Thanks.